I'll just pin. Oops. Sorry, Brad. I didn't mean to invite you, Brad. I hit the wrong thing. I wanted to pin. All right, let's begin. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us all together. Thank you for just instructing us in your Torah and your will. Help us to be gracious to each other. Help us to walk your Torah out in grace and see your salvation within your Torah, not looking to beat people over the head with it, but instead to help people be set free from the bondage of slavery and sin. And remember that we are servants only to you. That's why you redeemed us, so that we could be servants to you, Father. And I just pray, Father, oops. I just pray, Father, that you give everyone on this broadcast eyes and ears to hear and see the beautiful, wonderful things in your Torah, the revelations of everything that you have to show us. Give us new understandings of your word, Father. And I just pray over every single person in this broadcast. I pray against spirits of depression, anxiety. I pray against spirits of bondage that are keeping people trapped in negative thinking. I pray against negative thinking spirits that are tormenting people, Father. I just pray that you set their ears free, that you set their minds free. I pray against spirits of confusion, Father. I pray that you break the yoke of confusion off the people, Father. And as they learn your Torah, that their minds will be renewed and they will start to walk simply in your ways. Help us to walk humbly, always seeking to make your name great, never to make our own names great, Father. And just help us to have discernment against the people we listen to, the messages that we listen to, the things that we're looking at, the things that we're seeing, Father. I just pray that you give us the utmost discernment in this hour, in this time, in this season on the earth, Father. We pray that you give us discernment on where to be, where to go, how to prepare for anything that lies ahead. And I just pray, Father, that you protect our families, our houses, and just pray, Father, that you send out messengers to every single one of our family members, our friends, anyone that is lost, that you send out messengers to them to show them who Yeshua is, bring them an encounter with Yeshua that they will never forget, something that speaks directly to them. I just pray for healing over all of our friends and families, healing over everyone in this broadcast. I pray that you heal all ailments, sickness, Crohn's disease, diabetes, anything that anyone is struggling with, Father. I pray that you bring them to an understanding of it, bring them to healing, and bring them to new wisdom in how to deal with it. In Yeshua's mighty name, amen. Okay. Mishpatim, judgments. This is really an interesting, as we go through Mishpatim, I want you to think about the deeper understanding, okay? So not just, slavery as in people working for you, but also in how you treat other people. I noticed this week there was a lot of really strange legalism going on. I was getting really strange legalistic comments on my posts and stuff. And just remember that to the measure that you deal with other people is the measure that your Heavenly Father is going to deal with you. So if you're really gracious and give people the benefit of the doubt and give them mercy and grace and help them through things, help them learn things and open up the kingdom of heaven to them, that's what your Father will do for you, right? So this is just really important because I've noticed in the commandment keeping community, there's definitely sections of it that are very legalistic, very oppressive, and it's really causing people to not want to engage with the Torah. What does Yeshua say? He says, you close off the kingdom of heaven and you do not let the people enter in. I just want to look that up really quick. You off the kingdom. Can't remember what it is. Does anybody remember it? Anyways, you can look it up later, but he says something along the lines of, like, he's talking to the Pharisees. He's like, you're closing off the kingdom of heaven to people, right? The objective is to show them Yah's nature and character. to show them who he is, to show them his image. We are either operating in a beast human nature image, or we're operating in his image, right? And so we want to always be checking if we're operating in his image and we're trying to open up the Torah for people, or we're trying to close the door of the kingdom, right? A lot of people have been in certain doctrines for so long that they have trouble seeing even what we're talking about sometimes when it comes to the Torah, when it comes to the commandments and stuff. And they have trouble seeing the beauty. And like, so that's the part you want to open up to people, not the legalistic part, like you're going to burn all of that, but the come see what the kingdom is, come see what the family is doing kind of thing, right? Come eat at the table. And I just wanted to kind of touch on that as something to remember, because I have noticed like there's people falling away from keeping commandments and keeping the feasts and stuff because there's so much legalism in the community that it's like turning people away. And you and I and anyone else have no right to be you and I and no one else have any right. We don't have any right to be like telling people how to keep their Sabbath, or this is how you must keep your Sabbath. We can tell them what the exact commands say. We can tell them what the exact scriptures say, leave it there. You know, and if they have questions and they're truly coming to you, yeah, okay, this is how I do it. But be careful about like, you have to do your feast of Passover this way. You have to do that because this is where we have liberty and freedom, right? Because we're trying to interact with Yeshua. All prophecy is a testimony of Yeshua, right? So all the prophecy in the feast, all the prophecy in the Sabbath, all the prophecy in all of these things is the testimony of our salvation, of who Yeshua is, right? Of the picture of Yeshua. So anything that we're doing, we want to make sure that we're showing Yeshua in it. We're showing how it's his beautiful image in it, right? Not in a way that we're showing our image. Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's kind of like people kind of end up putting their image on it. Like, you have to do it like me. You got to be in my image, right? And so we're trying to put our own image on people. This is how I do it. You got to do it like me, right? And if you start to do that, are you any better than Rome, right? Because that's what Rome does, right? You got to do it in our image, right? We're seeking to figure out Yeshua's image, right? Okay, now that I've said my rant for the day. Mishpatim, judgments. So we're going to talk about slavery in the scriptures, which is not what you think it is. It's not what you think it is. So put your judgments aside for now and just be open to like looking into this deeper, right? It's really, really interesting. So the title comes from the first words of the first verse of the first reading, which could literally be translated to say, and these are the judgments that you will place before them, Exodus 21:1. The first three chapters of the Torah deliver legal code of laws and commandments that form the nucleus of Torah laws. This last chapter tells the story of how the people of Israel consented to keep those laws and entered into a covenant relationship with Yehovah through a series of rituals conducted by Moses. Okay. So a lot of what we'll talk about today is covenant relationships, making those covenant agreements, which is really, really important. You don't want to make those haphazardly. Let's get into it. We're going to go to Exodus 21:1. Again, reserve your judgment. We're going to talk about slaves right now. Reserve your judgment until we've gone through everything, okay?
Now these are the rules that you shall set before them. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him to God, and he shall bring him to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall be his slave forever. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she shall not go out as the male slaves do. If she does not please her master, who has designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He shall have no right to sell her to a foreign people, since he has broken faith with her. If he designates her for his son, he shall deal with her as with a daughter. If he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her marital rights. And if he does not do these 3 things for her, she shall go out for nothing without payment of money. Whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint for you a place to which he may flee. But if a man willfully attacks another to kill him by cunning, you shall take him from my altar, that he may die. Whoever strikes his father or his mother shall be put to death. Whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him shall be put to death. Whoever curses his father or his mother shall be put to death.
I'm sorry.
And quarrel, and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and the man does not die, but takes to his bed. Then if the man rises again and walks outdoors with his staff, he who struck him shall be cleared. Only he shall pay for the loss of his time, and shall have him thoroughly healed. When a man strikes his slave, male or female, with a rod, and the slave dies under his hand, he shall be avenged. But if the slave survives a day or 2, he is not to be avenged, for the slave is his money. When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman, so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. When a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free because of his eye. If he knocks out the tooth of his slave, male or female, he shall let the slave go free because of his tooth. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall not be liable. But if the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has been warned but has not kept it in, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner also shall be put to death. If a ransom is imposed on him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is imposed on him. If it gores a man's son or daughter, he shall be dealt with according to the same rule. If the ox gores a slave, male or female, the owner shall give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned.
Okay, lots to think about in here. Where to begin? First of all, if anyone's on Zoom, can you make sure you're muted? I can hear voices sometimes, and I don't think they're in my head. Okay, so buying a slave. So what is happening here? Buying a slave, when they were buying a slave, it's that the person had a debt to pay that they could not pay, or the person had come into poverty, and so they sold themselves to work for someone else. We do this today. We have jobs, do we not? Right? So we have jobs, and when you have a job, you are an indentured servant. You've signed a contract, a work contract, or whatever, and you become a servant, and you go by what that contract says. Okay, very, very similar. Now you have to remember that these people were coming out of 400 years. The entire group of people were coming out of 400 years of not indentured servitude type slavery, but actual slavery, where they were whipped and beaten, and they didn't have any chance of being set free. Even in certain countries to this day, there is still slavery where families are born into slavery. So if you're born in a certain tribe or a certain family, you are a slave for your entire life. There's no chance that you will ever go free. Even if you work really hard, you will never get freedom. You'll never get your own land. You'll never get all that. Now, before we get even more into talking about slavery, I want to go back and remember Genesis, okay? Remember in Genesis, where the people had to start paying taxes to Pharaoh because they needed to eat, and there was a famine, and Joseph had saved up all the food because Joseph knew the famine was coming. But then the people couldn't grow the food, but they needed food. So they started to have to pay taxes to Pharaoh. This is the first time that slavery is mentioned in the Bible. Do you know how much tax they had to pay? 20%. So, and they cried out to Pharaoh. The minute that Pharaoh said, okay, I'll feed you, but you got to pay 20% tax back. And he says, go read it. Don't quote me on it because I can't remember. I'm remembering from my head exactly what they were saying. But basically they said, now we are slaves to Pharaoh. Okay. I'm in Canada. If you make a decent wage, you pay 40 to 50% tax, right? Unless you're really, really good at accounting. Okay. So I don't know how it is in America, but I know certain states are worse than others. Like I think New York and California are worse than Texas and Florida and Arkansas and places like that. But think about that. They were going to have to pay 20%, and they're like, okay, now we're slaves. We're slaves to Pharaoh. Okay. So rethink how you think about slavery and what they're actually talking about. Okay. So when the people left, they were in like chattel slavery, like we saw in America, right? So in America, people were into forced slavery. They were bought and sold in that way. They were not signing contracts saying, I'm going to work for you for 6 years and I'll be set free and I'll go get my own land. They were being in forced slavery, right? That's not what this is for the most part. The only time it is forced slavery is when you get into warfare. Warfare is a bit different. So when we talk about the warfare scriptures, so this is brothers and sisters. So like the Hebrew people, the people in their community. Okay. So if you're buying somebody in your community as somebody to work for you, right? And that's called a slave in scripture. A lot of times what happens when people take these verses out of context, and this is what's really important, you don't even want to just put it back in the context of this whole book, but there's also other scriptures about slavery that you want to put this back into context with. Okay. There's other scriptures about how you treat a slave like you treat your own family. You are supposed to treat the people that work for you, you're supposed to treat them as family, right? So let's read all of the scriptures. Let's go through and read all the scriptures about this topic so that we have a full picture before we get into too many of the details. So we're going to go to let's go to first. We're going to go to, did we just do Exodus 21? Yes, that's what we did, right? Yes, that's what we did. Okay. Now go to Leviticus 25, around verse 39. We're going to go there. So the whole Torah is an entire document, so you don't really want to pick verses out. This is kind of like the thing that the Christian community do and the atheist community do, is they pluck verses out. So you could easily take a little snippet and be like, oh, this is brutal. But if you look at the whole document, it starts to make more sense. And you look at the history and the context, it starts to make more sense, right? What did I say? 39? It's 35, Leviticus 25, 35. If your brother becomes poor and cannot maintain himself with you, you shall support him as though he were a stranger and a sojourner. He shall live with you. Take no interest off from him or profit, but fear your Elohim, that your brother may live beside you. You shall not lend him money at interest, nor give him your food for profit. I am Jehovah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your Elohim. Okay, so when Elohim talks about slavery, he always refers them back to, you were slaves, I set you free. So don't put other people captive underneath you, right? Don't oppress other people underneath you. Treat them as brothers and sisters. And he reminds them that you were slaves. You know what that's like, right? So that's why he repeats that. Leviticus 25, 39. If your brother becomes poor beside you and sells himself to you, so that's context, right? That's how he got to be a slave. He became poor beside you and sold himself to you. You shall not make him serve as a slave. He shall be with you as a hired worker and a sojourner. He shall serve with you until the year of Jubilee. So the year of Jubilee is when everyone is set free. Everyone goes back to their own land, and everything is restored back. So you get kind of like a reset, right? That happens every 49 years. So for 49 years, these things happen. And then on the 54, I think people debate about this, is one of those things where people debate, but it's the Feast of Tabernacles. It's the Yom Kippur on the 49th year that everything's set free. debts are canceled, etc., etc. Then he shall go out from you, he and his children with him, and go back to his own clan and return to the possession of his fathers. For they are my servants, whom I bought out of the land of Egypt. They are not to be sold as slaves. So there's that connection again, right? Because we are servants to Yah. That's why, because we're servants to Yah, that's why he doesn't want other people. He doesn't want us serving other people, other masters, right? You can't serve two masters, right? He wants us serving him alone, right? You shall not rule over him ruthlessly, but you shall fear your Elohim. As for your male and female slaves whom you have, you may buy male and female slaves from among the nations that are around you. May you also buy from among the strangers who sojourn with you and their clans who are with you, who have been born into your land, so that they may be your property. You may bequeath them to your sons after you, and you may inherit as a possession forever. You may make slaves of them, but over your brothers of your own people of Israel you shall not rule over one another ruthlessly. So you can take slaves. He's saying that you can take slaves from and workers from other nations. And the only time that would happen is if they were conquering other lands, right? If a stranger or sojourner with you, so that's the people that have come into, and they're sojourning with you, okay, becomes rich, and your brother beside him is poor, and sells himself to the stranger or sojourner with you, or to a member of the stranger's clan, then after he is sold, he may be redeemed. One of his brothers may redeem him, or if an uncle or a cousin may redeem him, or a close relative from his clan may redeem him, or if he grows rich, he may redeem himself. So calculate with his buyer from the year he was sold until the year of Jubilee, for the price of his sale. For the price of his sale shall vary with the number of years. From the time he was the owner, he shall be rated as the time of the hired worker. You'll notice that the hired worker is in here a lot. Hired worker. If there are still many years left, he shall pay proportionately for his redemption from some of his sale price. If there remain but a few years left until the Jubilee, he shall calculate and pay for his redemption in the proportion to his years of service. He shall treat him as a worker hired year by year, and he shall not rule ruthlessly over him in your sight. If he is not redeemed by these means, then sorry, I lost my place. If he is not redeemed by these means, then he and his children shall be released in the year of Jubilee. For it is to me that the people of Israel are servants. They are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt, and I am Yehovah, your Elohim. Okay, so just take note of that, and then we're going to go to Deuteronomy 15:12. I just want to read them all, so you got to have a picture of all of them. Deuteronomy 15:12 to 8. Oops. Anybody else still not know how to spell Deuteronomy? No, just me. 12 to 18. Let's start at 7, Deuteronomy 15:7. If among you one of your brothers shall become poor, or in any of your towns within your land that Yehovah your Elohim is giving you, you shall not harden your heart and shut your hand against your poor brother, but you shall open your hand to him and lend him sufficient for his need, that it may be. Take care lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart, and you say, in the 7th year is the year of release is near, and your eye look grudgingly on your poor brother, and you give him nothing, and he cried to Yehovah against you, and you be guilty of sin. You shall give to him freely, and your heart shall not be grudging when you work to give to him, because for this, Yehovah your Elohim will bless you in all your work and all that you undertake. For there will never cease to be poor in the land. Therefore, I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother and the needy and the poor in your land. It's good to remember, too, that anyone that was in the land with them was sojourning with them for the most part, right? If your brother, a Hebrew man or Hebrew woman, is sold to you, and he shall serve you 6 years, and in the 7th year you shall let him go free from you. And when you let him go free from you, you shall not let him go empty-handed. You shall furnish him liberally out of your flock, out of your threshing floor, and out of your winepress. As for Yehovah Jehovah your Elohim has blessed you, so shall you give to him. You shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and that Jehovah your Elohim redeemed you. Therefore, I command you this today. But if he says to you, I will not go out from you, because he loves you and your household, and he is well off with you, then you shall take an awl and put his ear to the door, and he shall be your slave forever. So they pierced their ears. And to your female slave you shall do the same. It shall not seem hard to you when you let him go free from you, for at half the cost of the hired worker he has served you. For at half the cost of the hired worker he has served you for 6 years. So Jehovah your Elohim will bless you in all that you do. Okay. So the picture is, if somebody is working for you, you are going to treat them as family, period, end of story. You just treat them as family, you pay them as family, you let them go as family. The other thing that I found interesting in the in the Exodus part, let's just go back to Exodus for a second here. Oh, what I was going to point out too, the ear thing, what I found really interesting is there's like a ritual that the Levite does when I don't remember exactly where it is. Maybe somebody else knows and can put in the comments, but there's a ritual where they anoint the ear and the right thumb and the right foot. But it's interesting that they anoint the ear. So it's like this picture of like, you're becoming a servant to Jehovah, right? We'll get into this as we go further on when we talk about Yeshua setting the captives free. Because Yeshua, what did Yeshua say? And when he repeated Isaiah 61, he talks about how he's going to set the captives free. So this starts to get really, really interesting when we go into the history of slavery and stuff like this. But just for like the sake of time, basically you'll see little things. So these are likely incidences that came up, and Moshe had to go pray. He's like, okay, this happened. There was a fight, a pregnant woman got hit. What do I do in this situation? And so you got to kind of remember that some of these things are probably situations that came up that Moshe had to deal with. And so he was like praying and figuring out, okay, how do we deal with it if they decide to have a fight? How do we deal with it if the man strikes the person working for them, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing to really notice about when a man, so this is verse 26, Exodus 21:26. If a man strikes the eye of a slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let his slave go free because of his eye. So when you really think about that, what is that saying? If you had somebody working for you and they were a good worker and they were, first of all, you're supposed to treat them like your own family. So you should be slapping them in the face and destroying their eye. But the cost of beating your slave is that your slave will go free, right? So that is like the prevention measure, right? There's people talk about the stoning of the children all the time, and they get really uppity about it. But if you lived in a community and your children knew that if they were rebellious, they would, first of all, they'd have to go to the Sanhedrin and have a meeting with the Sanhedrin. First, the community would come before them. They had to go before the community. So all of these steps were in place before there would be any stoning of children. Okay, just FYI. The chances of your children continuously being rebellious were very slim, because they knew deep down that if they continued in their rebellion, first of all, the community would come to them, then they would go to the Sanhedrin, and they would go through this process, right? And they knew the outcome. So if they knew that, the people would just be in order, right? And so that's what this is saying too. Like, that if you hurt your servant, they will go free. And you will not have that helper anymore. Okay. And so these are different things that would prevent the altercation from even happening as well. So it's good to think of it like that too. And we always think about this in our like Western mindset, which is really so far off from where these people were at, right? We know not to hit other people, and we know not to do these things, but they are just coming out of straight slavery where they were beaten all the time, right? So they're learning, they're baby steps, right? The other thing, as we talk about this stuff, I want to point something out to you in the U.S. Constitution. In the U.S. Constitution, in the 13th Amendment, you will notice, if you look at my screen, you guys can just look up the 13th Amendment on congress.gov. So I'll just read you the 13th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. Section 1, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Section 2, Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So slavery was abolished in the US of A, except for when you have been convicted of a crime. Guess how many current inmates there are in the US of A right now? 2008, the peak was 2.3 million-ish, 2.3 million-ish. Trying to look for a newer number. So 2008 was peak, so it's gone down a bit from then, I guess. Between 2019 and 2020, the United States saw a significant drop in total incarcerations. So if you are in prison in the US of A, it's not like that in Canada. You might have to work, right? Be forced into labor. So slavery is alive and well. And so there's likely more slaves in the United States than there was actually in biblical times. Currently. So just food for thought when you're trying to wrap your brain around all this stuff. Yeah, slavery is definitely alive and well in the world, alive and well. We all know that with all the trafficking talk. And I have a clothing company, so I know a lot about, the slavery that exists in the world. I made clothing in Canada for a long time, 15 years I made clothing in Canada. And is very expensive to make clothing. Clothing is very difficult to make and it's very expensive to make. The reason that clothing is so cheap, that you can buy and you can go to Walmart and buy cheap t-shirts and you can go to these places and buy cheap clothes, go to Shein and buy cheap clothes, is because they are using slaves. So if you're one of these people that does that all the time, you have to understand that there's a very high likelihood that you are employing slaves to make your clothes for you, right? So just be aware of that. Try to buy stuff made in the USA. I mean, it could even happen in the USA still, right? But yeah, I don't know how that works in the USA. I've looked at factories in the USA, but I haven't really deep delved into it. A big part of the reason why I stopped making clothing myself using factories in Canada and stuff is because it was so expensive to do it ethically that I couldn't compete. Literally cannot compete because it's so expensive to do it ethically. Yeah, so food for thought. Let's go on to, we're going to get back into slavery later on in the Jeremiah portion, but let's go on to the other laws about restitution. So we're at Exodus 21:33.
When a man opens a pit, or when a man digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make restoration. He shall give money to its owner, and the dead beast shall be his. When one man's ox butts another so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and share its price, and the dead beast also they shall share. Or if it is known that the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has not kept it in, he shall repay ox for ox, and the dead beast shall be his. If a man steals an ox or a sheep and kills it or sells it, he shall repay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. If a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. If the stolen beast is found alive in his possession, whether it is an ox or a donkey or a sheep, he shall pay double.
Okay, America will love this. So if a thief comes into your house and you strike him and he dies, there's no problem for you. It's fine. Canada is a bit different. There was some incidences in Canada where people were broken onto people's property and somebody shot at them, and I think one of the people died, and there was a whole big thing. I can't remember the outcome, but it's different in Canada, but in the States you have a lot more liberty in that regard. That's also interesting. Like, if and this is like a distinctly American thing, and I can speak to this because I live in Canada, so I know the differences. I've lived in America, so I know the difference. I've lived both places. In America, I would think twice before just venturing onto somebody's property. I would never just venture onto somebody's property because like there's a chance that they could think that you're up to no good, right? And like you would never just do that, right? In Canada, you would never be worried about it. Honestly, you would never. I did tell you guys this funny story, if you don't mind. So my friend drove me back to Canada after I'd been in the States for a while. He's from Texas, okay? And I had to like explain to him, like, you cannot drive to the border with your gun still in the car. You have to leave your gun in Montana. He's like, no. I'm like, yes, you have to leave your gun in Montana. You must do that. And I had to convince him. And of course, what happens when we pull up to the border with Texas plates? Full search. They searched the whole vehicle. They did like tests everywhere. They asked him like, okay, well, where do you store your firearms? Because when they go through and test, right, they know they can find the residue, right? And so they tested he told them where he usually stores the firearm and stuff like that. And it's just such a stark difference. And he was like really concerned because he's like, I'm not used to not being without a firearm. And I said, like, we don't really, like, it's very safe in Canada. Like it depends on where you are. Where I am is incredibly safe. Like I can go out walking at night by myself. I would never be afraid. I'd never be worried, right? Very different. If I was in Vancouver or something, no, I wouldn't do that. But where I am, I would definitely feel completely safe. It's definitely a different feeling. You never assume somebody has like something on them or anything like that. But in America, I never did either, depending on where I was. Like when I was in Arkansas, I would go walking by myself, no problem. I never felt the people are so good, right? It just depends where you are in the country, right? But I just found that really, really interesting. Like he was really worried about, I'm like, no, it's so, where we're going is so safe. You would never be concerned, right? So that's interesting. It's just like the differences, right? And I think honestly, like, you guys know me. I think like if somebody's on your property, I go by the Torah. If they're on your property, to me, this is what should happen. Okay, I want to point out something to you in 22 verse 1. If a man steals an ox or sheep and kills it and sells it, he shall repay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. Now, for these Christians that say the Torah is done away with, you don't see the Torah in the New Testament, I want to show you guys something that you can use. You can put this in your arsenal to show them. So take that Torah law, and we're going to go to Luke 17, I think. I'm hoping I remember it correctly. Nope. Let's try 11. Man, I have to memorize where this is. Okay, we're going to Google. One sec. Luke 19. I was so close. Luke 19. Let's go there. Okay, put this in your arsenal. Luke 19. He entered Jericho. Yeshua, entered Jericho and was passing through. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. And he was seeking to see who Yeshua was, but on account of the crowd, he could not because he was small in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed onto a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass by. And when Yeshua came to that place, he looked up and saw him and said, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully, received Yeshua, salvation, joyfully, okay? Brought salvation, Yeshua, to his house, okay? And then when they saw it, they all so hurried and came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled. He has gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, behold, Lord, half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone, so stolen anyone of anything, I shall restore it fourfold. Exodus 22. What is the price if you've defrauded or stolen from somebody? What is the price that you pay back? Fourfold, right? So he's saying, I will fulfill the Torah command. So Yeshua came to his house. Yeshua granted him salvation. He met Yeshua. He became known to Yeshua, right? And then he repented and did a Torah command. He said, I'm going to restore it fourfold, okay? And Yeshua said to him, today salvation has come to this house, since he is also a son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost, okay? Do you see the whole breakdown there? He did a Torah command. And then Yeshua said, today salvation has come to this house. What is repentance? Turning from your ways back to God's ways, right? The full turning, right? And realizing that you need to make it right, right? Okay, let's go back to the portion. We're at 22 verse 5 in Exodus.
If a man causes a field or vineyard to be grazed over, or lets his beast loose, and it feeds in another man's field, he shall make restitution from the best in his own field and in his own vineyard. If fire breaks out and catches in thorns, so that the stacked grain or the standing grain or the field is consumed, he who started the fire shall make full restitution. If a man gives to his neighbor money or goods to keep safe, and it is stolen from the man's house, then if the thief is found, he shall pay double. If the thief is not found, the owner of the house shall come near to God to show whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. For every breach of trust, whether it is for an ox, for a donkey, for a sheep, for a cloak, or for any kind of lost thing, of which one says, this is it, the case of both parties shall come before God. The one whom God condemns shall pay double to his neighbor. If a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep safe, and it dies or is injured or is driven away without anyone seeing it, an oath by the Lord shall be between them both to see whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. The owner shall accept the oath, and he shall not make restitution. But if it is stolen from him, he shall make restitution to its owner. If it is torn by beasts, let him bring it as evidence. He shall not make restitution for what has been torn. If a man borrows anything of his neighbor, and it is injured or dies, the owner not being with it, he shall make full restitution. If the owner was with it, he shall not make restitution. If it was hired, it came for its hiring fee. If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with...
Okay, I want to stop there because then I want to separate these two sections. So what you're looking at is like if you lived in a country, you would have laws, right? So a lot of times you're talking to people like, oh, we're not under law. Okay, so if you had your neighbor's property and you stole it, you know, are you under the law to return it? Like as a good Christian, right? It's just common sense, right? These are just common sense things. And this is like, okay, we have a disagreement. We have this issue happened with our animals and they fought and one died, and you know what, how are we going to make amends? And so we're not like fighting each other forever and mortal enemies. So we have a judgment, right? You go before a judge and the judge makes a judgment and says, okay, cut the live beast in half, split the meat, go on your merry ways, right? That's what these things are. So you know, keep it really, really simple, right? And understanding. Don't get overburdened, but like, you know, you don't really need to memorize that if you start a fire that you need to pay retributions to your neighbor for starting the fire, right? Like that should be the Torah on your heart, you should know that if you've done damage to another, you should go and try to make retributions, right? That's what this is. It's like just understanding how you live with each other and how you deal with each other if these types of situations arise. And if you live with other people, these types of situations just naturally arise, right? We're human. We're going to get into the next part, which is, I think a lot of different various commandments. Let's just listen to them. We're at Exodus 22:16.
He shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. If her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the bride price for virgins. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. Whoever lies with an animal shall be put to death.
I just want to point out this one because this one's actually really common in today's society. Really, really common. The very first one. If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed, so she's not engaged, and lies with her, he's supposed to make her his wife. Period. End of story. And so we definitely do have a society now where like people, men and women, go into seduce each other and then they just like use each other and disregard each other, right? So it's really important to understand the heart behind this is don't seduce people you don't want to marry, right? Which I think is a good rule, right? Don't seduce people you don't want to marry. Do it properly.
Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be devoted to destruction. You shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. You shall not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you do mistreat them and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath will burn, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows and your children fatherless.
This is a really good example of the judgment. I was saying in the beginning how the judgment you give other people is the judgment you'll go back upon you. So he's saying if you're oppressing the father and the widow, the fatherless and the widow, and you're mistreating them and you're like belittling them and doing all that stuff, and they cry out to you, out to Jehovah, he will then make your wives widows and your children fatherless, right? So it's like he'll flip the script on you, right? So be careful the things that you put on other people.
If you lend money to any of my people with you who is poor, you shall not be like a moneylender to him, and you shall not exact interest from him. If ever you take your neighbor's cloak and pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down, for that is his only covering, and it is his cloak for his body. In what else shall he sleep? And if he cries to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. You shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people.
This is important that people do this all the time. Do not curse your leaders. I know I'm in Canada. Trust me, I get it. I'm in Canada. Trust me, I get it. Pray for them. Do not curse them. You're not doing yourself any good. This is one that's really common among believers, okay? Don't do it. Just trust, I know our flesh wants to do it, but don't do it, okay?
You shall not delay to offer from the fullness of your harvest and from the outflow of your presses. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do the same with your oxen and with your sheep. 7 days it shall be with its mother. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. You shall be consecrated to me. Therefore you shall not eat any flesh that is torn by beasts in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. You shall not spread a false report. You shall not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not fall in with the many to do evil, nor shall you bear witness in a lawsuit, siding with the many, so as to pervert justice, nor shall you be partial to a poor man in his lawsuit.
Okay, this is important too. This goes on a lot in Christian Torah believer community, spreading false reports. Talking about what other people said when they're not there, or talking about people out of context, taking snippets of videos out, so common, especially on TikTok, taking snippets of videos out of context and then adding to that and like massaging the context and not really knowing in depth. And I see this a lot with stitch debates. It's like, that's why I don't do stitch debates with people, is because there's so often missing information in the person's point of view. So if I stitch somebody and I say, oh, well, you're saying this and this and that, and it kind of like letting them have it, what I'm doing is misrepresenting that person's point of view, most likely. Almost always, and I've had it happen to me like hundreds of times, but it's like almost always you're misrepresenting that person's heart, that person's intentions, and that person's point of view. So just be really, really careful. And in the comment section, I'm really guilty of this. Like I have to really rein myself in the comment section, because there's just, it's so little section, there's so little for writing back and forth that people end up kind of like jabbing at each other. And like they don't, when you're in the comment section talking to somebody, you're not really getting to know who that person is and their point of view. And so you are creating false reports and you're creating confusion often just by doing that back and forth. So just be really aware of that, because you don't know that person, you don't know their life, you don't know how they walk or anything like that. Do not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not fall in with the many to do evil, nor shall you bear witness in a lawsuit siding with many as to pervert justice. Yeah, so just be careful if you haven't witnessed something with your own eyes, just be careful what you say and what you know, how you speak about it. Bearing false witness is not just about lying. It's about misrepresenting the other person. It's about misrepresenting who that other person is. And one thing to remember in like the deeper spiritual level of this is, no matter what, other people were made in the image of God too. They were made in the image of Yah too. So you don't want to misrepresent them and present them to be evil, you know, unless you have like an actual, you know, it's different if you have actual evidence and you're like, okay, this is happening and this is evidence. But yeah, just pray about it if you're going to go about that, right?
If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you shall bring it back to him. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying down under its burden, you shall refrain from leaving him with it. You shall rescue it with him. You shall not pervert the justice due to your poor in his lawsuit. Keep far from a false charge, and do not kill the innocent and righteous, for I will not acquit the wicked. And you shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. You shall not oppress a sojourner. You know the heart of a sojourner, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield. But the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave the beasts of the field may eat. You shall do likewise with your vineyard and with your olive orchard. I
just want to give you guys some testimony on this one. I've had friends that have done this. So they acquired land and they worked the land for 6 years, and on the 7th year they let the land rest, and fruit trees and stuff like that, they let it rest on the 7th year, and they had double the amount of fruit on the 6th year, and then the 7th year they didn't hardly get any fruit on there, just a little bit, and then after that the tree even produced more. So there was something about it, like just letting it, don't pick it, just let it go, right? There's something about it that restored it as well. And so apparently too, it restores the soil to just let it rest. Obviously, that's why farmers do field rotation, right?
Days you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall rest, that your ox and your donkey may have rest, and the son of your servant woman and the alien may be refreshed. Pay attention to all that I have said to you, and make no mention of the names of other gods, nor let it be heard on your lips. 3 times in the year you shall keep a feast to me. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. As I commanded you, you shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days at the appointed time in the month of Abib. For in it you came out of Egypt. None shall appear before me empty-handed. You shall keep the feast of harvest, of the first fruits of your labor, of what you sow in the field. You shall keep the feast of ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather in from the field the fruit of your labor. 3 times in the year shall all your males appear before the Lord God.
A lot of people were asking me how I determine Passover. I think this year it's pretty obvious, but this is one of the little moments this is how, for me personally, I have assessed it. At the appointed time, TikTok updated, and it's so annoying. Sorry. TikTok is way more annoying on live now because I can't mute people wanting to come on and be guests for the whole live. I can't do that anymore. And it always asks me if I still want to be on live. It's so annoying now. Do better, TikTok. Okay. So why do I keep the month? Why do I do the Passover timing that I do? For you shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days at the appointed time in the month of Abib. What does Abib mean? Abib means ripe. It's the term used to determine when the barley ears, the ears on the barley are ripe and are ready for harvest. Okay, because you need the barley harvest to have the first fruits grain offering, right? So if you don't have ripe barley, you can't do the correct offerings, right? And so you have to think that these were very agricultural people. That's how they would keep their calendar using the agricultural. That's why the Sukkot is a harvest festival as well, right? So they would be waiting for the barley to be ripe so that they could harvest enough to have a field for harvest for the grain offering. And that's how I go by it. And I know lots of people, they look at the equinox and stuff. Well, the equinox kind of has to happen for the barley to ripen. You need that sunlight to ripen the barley, right? So it's kind of connected anyways, right? If the equinox hasn't happened yet, then the barley won't get ripe, right? Because there's not enough sunlight to ripen the barley. So that's what the month of Abib means. And now if you look at a Hebrew calendar now, just for the people that don't know, it'll say Nisan. So that's just that they changed the name later on. I don't recall what Nisan means, but Abib means the ears are ripe. And which I find is really beautiful because it's a Passover season. And in the Passover season is always when people wake up and they come out of the mainstream confusion church and they come into understanding that God's word is a whole beautiful, amazing, deep picture. It's a deep well to draw from, right? And so their ears become ripe, right? And their ears become ripe and they start to celebrate the Passover. During Passover season, every year, we will get new people that will realize this stuff, that will wake up to this stuff, right? And it's just that their ears got ripe. It's amazing. It's so cool how that works. So for me, I think personally that this year's Passover, there shouldn't be a lot of debates on calendars because he's given us a giant eclipse. He's given us a giant eclipse on the 8th. Okay, so the eclipse that happens on the 8th across America is at like 4:30, so like right before sunset, right? I don't know what time the sunset sets at that time. Well, so it's going to cross during sunset hours. So I think I haven't totally checked that out, but it starts at like 4:38, starts crossing America at 4:38. So it's going to cross during that time. And when does the new moon start? If the new moon starts that day at dusk, right? We're all looking at the eclipse and the new moon at the same time. That's pretty crazy, right? Anyways, so, and that would be the biblical New Year. And then 14 days later, you have your Passover, okay? So the new moon marks the new year in the month of Abib. And then 14 days later, you have your Passover, okay? Lots of people are asking how that works. That's how it works. And for me, I'm like not questioning the timing this year because he gave us an eclipse, you guys. Come on, what more do you need? Right? I don't debate calendars to begin with because there's a lot of calendars. Everybody always asks me about calendars. There's a lot of calendars out there and everyone has really good reasons for why they do what they do. And I think it's the job of the man in the house to determine what calendar the house keeps. The man of the house is the priest of your house. He's the priest of your home. He needs to sift through the calendars and he needs to decide which calendar to keep. Okay. I am not the priest of your home. You're the man of the house is a priest of your home. Right. And so definitely that's something you should step up into and do if you feel like you want to sift through the calendars. I definitely do not feel like it is my place in any sort of way. I'm telling you what I'm going to do and what I think and what I see. But, that's for you guys to decide yourselves. I really, really, because Passover too is very much a household thing, right? You mark your door. You're marking your door. I'm not marking your door. You're marking your door, right? So it's, and the husband's the priest of the home. So for me to tell you that I'm usurping authority over your husband, no way, right? So you could see how that doesn't make sense, right? So people always ask me, like, tell us what calendar. No, ask your husband to do it. Ask him to figure it out, right? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. And if people want to debate calendars and that's like enjoyable for them, feel free. It's not enjoyable for me. I don't enjoy it personally. It's not something I enjoy to do. I've done it enough. I did my time. I've probably looked at all of them pretty in depth. I've prayed about them all pretty in depth. And my conclusion too, and this is what Brother Judah says too, is that when Messiah gets here, Yeshua, when Messiah gets here, he will sort that out. And the fact that he's getting so close and he's giving us eclipses tells me that he's trying to sort it out, right? It's like, he's like, hey, maybe you guys could stop arguing about this and keep your eyes, fixed on me, right? Because he is going to sort out the calendar, right? We're not all going to debate it forever. Okay, let's carry on. Let's carry on. It's my 2 cents that you never asked for.
You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened, or let the fat of my feast remain until the morning. The best of the first fruits of your ground you shall bring into the house of the Lord your God. You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. Behold,
So after he talks about the unleavened bread, he talks about, so you're bringing the unleavened sacrifice before him, right? What does unleavened mean? It means pure, undefiled. You've removed all the extra puff from it. You've removed all the arrogance from it. So Yeshua talks about the leaven of the Pharisees. It talks about leaven of Herod. I've gone through this before, the leaven of Pharisees and leaven of Herod. It's like the extra added stuff that detracts from what Jehovah is trying to show you, right? So you don't want to, you shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened, with any extra leaven, right? And so do we want to be adding Easter bunnies and Easter eggs? So this hits hard. Okay. Always look at the order. Look at the order that he's doing things in, okay? Keep the feast. Make sure it's unleavened, right? Keep the feast of unleavened bread. This is the time that you're going to do it. Don't appear empty-handed. Give me the first fruits of your labor, what you sow in the field. And don't offer the blood of my sacrifice, Yeshua. Don't offer the blood of my sacrifice, Yeshua, with anything leavened. Is Easter bunnies leavened? Right? Are Easter bunnies leavened? Are Easter eggs leavened? I would say they are leavened. Yes, absolutely. They are. They have nothing to do with it. You're adding confusion. You're adding extra stuff in. Okay. Yeshua says, don't beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, and beware. In Mark, he says, beware of leaven of Herod. What's the leaven of Herod? Herod was a Roman. What's the leaven of Herod? All that Roman stuff that gets sprinkled on, right? Don't sprinkle Roman leaven on everything, right? Let the fat of my feast remain until morning, until the morning. Where was I? The best of the first fruits of your ground you shall bring to the house of Yehovah your Elohim. So bringing your best to offer him. You shall not, and then this is interesting, you shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. Why is that in there randomly, right? So that is about not doing pagan fertility worship rituals, which I find is really, really interesting, because what has been added to the false, perverted, unleavened bread feast. I don't want to say the name out loud because he just told us a couple paragraphs ago not to say the names out loud, right? The one that starts with an E. What have they added to it? What's been added to that? Chocolate bunnies. What else gets added to it? Ham, right? you should not boil a young goat in its mother's milk is a pagan Canaanite fertility ritual. So don't come to him and celebrate the Passover and eat of the Passover, bringing the leaven of pagan fertility rituals. So if you have something that is even suspicious of being a pagan fertility ritual, let it go. Why is it a problem? Just let it go, right? Don't keep those things. This you could couple. Okay, so understand that unleavened bread is the communion meal, right? When Yeshua was eating his Passover meal with his disciples, that was a communion covenant meal. Okay, Paul talks about the depth of the communion covenant meal in 1 Corinthians 11. So if you look at 1 Corinthians 11, where Paul talks about don't eat of the Passover, don't eat of the communion, right? Don't eat of that in an unworthy state. Make sure you've understood and you know what you are partaking of, okay? Because if you partake of these things and you don't understand the depth of what you are partaking of, you are you're eating and drinking judgment upon yourself, okay? So if you are eating of the Passover and then sending your kids out to collect Easter eggs, and you haven't bothered to read in the Torah to not mix pagan fertility rituals with your offering to Jehovah, and what a perversion that is, and how that desecrates his name, and how that's horrible and disrespectful. If you haven't bothered to make that connection in your head or even think about that, don't eat of the communion. Don't do it, because you're eating and drinking judgment upon yourself, because you should know better. If you're making a covenant agreement, you should know better. You should be in the Torah. You should be reading what it says, and you shall know what it says, right? Take the time, okay? Just be careful of that. Okay, I feel like I'm really ranting today. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, let's go on.
Send an angel before you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. But if you carefully obey his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. When my angel goes before you and brings you to the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites, the Hivites and the Jebusites, and I blot them out, you shall not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do as they do, but you shall utterly overthrow them and break their pillars in pieces. You shall serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from among you. None shall miscarry or be barren in your land. I will fulfill the number of your days. I will send my terror before you, and will throw into confusion all the people against whom you shall come. And I will make all your enemies turn their backs to you. And I will send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites from before you. I will not drive them out from before you in 1 year, lest the land become desolate and the wild beasts multiply against you. Little by little I will drive them out from before you, until you have increased and possessed the land. And I will set your border from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates. For I will give the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them and their gods. They shall not dwell in your land, lest they make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you.
So interesting. This happens all the time too. Like when you start having like mixing of different religions and stuff in areas, and it starts to water down everything, and it gets all mixy, right? We're living through that right now. This is really interesting. I just noticed this. I will send my terror before you and throw into confusion all the people against whom you shall come, and I will make your enemies turn their backs on you. I will send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hittites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites from before you. I will not drive them out from you in 1 year, lest the land become desolate and wild beasts multiply against you. Little by little I will drive them out before you, until you have increased and possessed the land. Little by little. That's really interesting. So in little bits, it'll get better and better. I'm thinking about that for this time that we're kind of heading into. Jehovah really showed me through multiple years of different things that the way that the kingdom is going to come in is going to be people just like King David came into the land. Okay, so King David came into the land. He turned from his compromise. He was in compromise before he came into the land. He was working for the enemy. He was doing all sorts of stuff. He was in compromise. Him and his men repented. The men repented. They cried out to Jehovah. David put on his kingly garments. He dusted himself off, dressed himself up like a king, and started to go back into the land and take back his rightly what he was rightly given by Yah, right? Just like we are rightly given things, we are given dominion by Yah, right? And so as he goes into the land, what does he do? He follows the ark. He follows the covenant. The covenant went before him. He followed the covenant. Okay. And so what Yah was really speaking to me through showing me this is that people are going to come to the Torah. They're going to understand that we have to walk in his ways. We have to make him king over us. We have to make that covenant strong and pure and good, and not be wavering and not be willy-nilly about it anymore, and not mix and not disrespect him. And as we do that, as we put our feet on that ground and more people put their feet on that ground and we take back dominion, he will go before us and he will cause the other people to be scattered. He will cause them to go into confusion. You already see this. People are going into confusion. The things that they're saying don't even make sense, and they think it makes sense. It doesn't even make sense. They'll turn their backs. Okay. And then we'll be able to take more and more and more territory. What did we talk about last week? Enlarge the place of your tent. Enlarge the place of your tent. And I'll just speak from my own personal experience. I have felt really like making myself small on TikTok and not saying things and not, and not being bold on here. But after I read that, like, enlarge the place of your tent, right? So all of us need to show people the Torah. And then, as you know, so many of you that come and join me every week, you're going to go out and you're going to show somebody else some stuff. And then they're going to go out and they're going to show somebody else some stuff. And the place of his tent is going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And the enemies are just going to flee in terror, because if you know what I know, and you've been through this, like I've been through this, you know that if he's walking with you and you're walking with him, nothing touches you, right? He's got you. Like if you're 100% walking with him and looking and searching and trying to do the best that you can do to serve him and honor his name and glorify his name and make his name great, nothing touches you. You know that, right? And so as more and more and more of us do that, this is why they're afraid of us. We're a force. We will be with him on our side and him ahead of us and him behind us as our rear guard. We are a force to be reckoned with, right? They cannot win, right? They do not win. They cannot win, right? So just remember that, right? So as you go forward, just remember, he's going to throw them into confusion. You just got to keep your eyes on the covenant. You're in the covenant. The ark is going before you. You're dancing behind it. I hope that makes sense. The covenant confirmed. We're in Exodus 24:1.
Then he said to Moses, "Come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship from afar. Moses alone shall come near to the Lord, but the others shall not come near, and the people shall not come up with him." Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the rules. And all the people answered with one voice and said, "All the words that the Lord has spoken we will do." And Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. He rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he set young men of the people of Israel, who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen to the Lord. And Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he threw against the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. And they said, "All that the Lord has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient." And Moses took the blood and threw it on the people and said, "Behold the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words." Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel went up, and they saw the God of Israel. There was under his feet as it were a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. And he did not lay his hand on the chief men of the people of Israel. They beheld God, and ate and drank.
I want to point out the sapphire here, sapphire stone. So what color is in the tzitzits, right? It's a blue thread. So the blue thread is to remind you of the throne room. I just want to look up sapphire. See the color of it. Yeah, it's like a blue. It's like a royal blue if you look it up. So you see the blue thread in the tzitzit, and you see the blue thread. You see the blue on the throne room floor of Yehovah. When you look at the 6-colored perverted rainbow covenant flag, the 6-colored perverted rainbow covenant one, you'll notice that it is one of the blue tones that's missing. So it's like the indigo-y blue. So it's very similar to the sapphire. And this understanding is usually what's missing from people to enter the full covenant. This understanding of the sapphire. So what are the tzitzits for? To remind you to keep the commands of Yah, right? To remind you that he's sitting on the throne, that he's the ruler over all of us, and that he's king, right? And so why do they have the 6-color rainbow instead of the 7-color rainbow? Why have they removed that indigo color, the blue sapphire color? Because they do not want to be obedient to Yehovah. They want to go about it their own way, okay? And that's why they are told to wear the tzitzits, right? So that you're remembering you got to keep the commandments. If you look up, I don't know if they'll still be online, the Denver murals. Look up the Denver rainbow murals. Let's do conspiracy theory for a second here. Here it is. Okay, so just Google Denver Airport rainbow murals. You'll notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ends with a purple color. There's no blue color there. 6-color rainbow over this peace covenant image at the Denver airport. I've done a video on this, but if you go in, I'll show you this. We'll flip it. This is fun stuff, so let's flip it. Let's look at it. Okay. So you have, some might say this is the blue color, but that's just the backdrop. Okay, so you have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's just the backdrop. It's not a blue color in the thing. So 6-color flag, not 7. There's 7 colors in a rainbow, not 6. Okay. You're missing the indigo. You're missing the sapphire color, which is the fear, reverence of Elohim. You've got peace, right? Everybody's laying down their swords, peace. And we've talked about this. They're going to say peace, but there is no peace. Sudden destruction will come. And now if you look at this guy, he's wearing a lederhosen and a red tie, right? And he's beating a sword into a plowshare, right? This is false covenant stuff. This is the false covenant that they're going to try to push on you guys. Okay. This little blonde child with a red tie, guys, think about it, and a lederhosen. So he's a German little child, right? And this is like, who's this? With the America one. Who's that girl? Who's that look like? Anyways, so this little lederhosen German red tie wearing child is beating a sword into a plowshare. Remember this, you might need it in the future. Little German child beating a sword into a plowshare under a fake rainbow covenant. Okay. Fake, false, missing the commands of Yah, rainbow covenant. if they have. Of course, the picture that I want is not showing up. I like the Brave browser, but I find like it doesn't work as well as Google. You see it? That's what he looked like as a child, okay? He's German, part German. Lederhosen, sword, plowshare. 6-color rainbow, missing the 7th color. Okay, just put it in your pocket for later. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's just good to have little information on your radar. You know, I'm not saying anything's going to happen or it's not going to happen. I'm just putting that information on your radar so you can recognize it if anything does happen. Because I don't know. Okay. Sapphire, that's what were we talking about? Sapphire. So sapphire is the tzitzit color to remind you to keep the commandments. That's why they don't put it in the 6-color rainbow, because they are not keeping the commandments of Yah. They are in rebellion. And that's kind of like that false love, false peace kind of thing, is trying to go about it your own way, trying to do most of it, but not being reverent to Yehovah. So there's seven spirits of Yehovah. The last one that people acquire is the reverence, the true reverence. And that is the beginning of understanding, right? So that opens up the door for you to understand the whole thing. But that reverent understanding, that respect, right? So there's a lot of people that are believers that operate in so much disrespect of Yehovah still. They disrespect the covenant, they disrespect his name, and they don't even realize to the level that they're doing it because they don't have that sapphire color. They don't have that level of the spirit to understand it, right? There's seven spirits that we have to acquire. Those 7 spirits of Yah. That's Isaiah 11:1. The one that's usually missing is that last one. And that's the one that is associated with the Feast of Sukkot, right? The Feast of Sukkot is where you can tabernacle with Yehovah. You are not able to tabernacle and be in his kingdom if you don't have that reverent respect for him, because you'll just be in rebellion all the time. So you can't tabernacle with him if you're in rebellion, right? That's why you need it. Let's carry on. I think we're at verse 9.
The Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and wait there, that I may give you the tablets of stone with the law and the commandment which I have written for their instruction." So Moses rose with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up into the mountain of God. And he said to the elders, "Wait here for us until we return to you. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a dispute, let him go to them." Then Moses went up on the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. The glory of the Lord dwelt on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And on the 7th day he called to Moses out of the midst of the cloud. Now the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on the top of the mountain in the sight of the people of Israel. Moses entered the cloud and went up on the mountain. And Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights.
So this is his first trip up the mountain to get the 10 commandments. The golden calf has not happened yet. I just want you to take note for next week's portion, because we'll go through golden calf stuff, I think, next week. Maybe not quite, but I think it's next week. The people said, what did the people say? All the words that Yehovah has spoken, we will do. So the people have agreed. Moses came and told the people all the words of Yehovah and all the statutes, the rules. And the people answered with one voice and said, all the words that Yehovah has spoken, we will do. Okay, so this is his first trip up, first time getting the 10 commandments, okay? And then we're going to have them fall away from that after. Let's move on to Isaiah. We're going to go to Isaiah 66:1. Isaiah 66:1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1
Thus says the Lord, heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. What is the house that you would build for me, and what is the place of my rest? All these things my hand has made, and so all these things came to be, declares the Lord. But this is the one to whom I will look, he who is humble and contrite in spirit, and trembles at my word. He who slaughters an ox is like one who kills a man. He who sacrifices a lamb like one who breaks a dog's neck. He who presents a grain offering like one who offers pig's blood. He who makes a memorial offering of frankincense like one who blesses an idol. These have chosen their own ways, and their soul delights in their abominations. I also will choose harsh treatment for them and bring their fears upon them, because when I called, no one answered. When I spoke, they did not listen, but they did what was evil in my eyes, and chose that in which I did not delight. Hear the word of the Lord, you who tremble at his word. Your brothers who hate you and cast you out for my name's sake have said, let the Lord be glorified, that we may see your joy. But it is they who shall be put to shame. The sound of an uproar from the city, a sound from the temple, the sound of the Lord rendering recompense to his enemies.
So what is this talking about? Just as we went through, and he says this repeatedly, he says he doesn't want endless sacrifices. He doesn't want the endless blood of offerings. He wants obedience, right? So those who tremble at his word and offer him obedience, that is the most beautiful thing that you can bring as an offering. How can you be obedient to him? How can you trust him? How can you just trust his word? He says, keep the Sabbath, just trust him, right? He says, don't eat pork, just trust him. You don't have to argue with him. You don't have to have all these reasons. You can just trust him, right? Trembles at his word, just trusts his word, right? He's the creator. And so what is he saying? He's saying, I don't want, because you're blessing idols. When you're endlessly putting Jesus back up on the cross, you're endlessly putting Yeshua back up on the cross because you're going about things your own way. Instead of just choosing the things that please him, choose the things that please him, and do not delight in the abominations. Choose the things that please him so that you're not desecrating his name. You're not using his name in vanity, right? So don't try to bless an idol. Don't try to put up your Christmas tree and bless it and then be like, my soul delights in this abomination. He's called it an abomination, but my soul delights in this, right? He doesn't want those offerings. They are like offering pig's blood, right? He wants obedience. Let's go on to verse 7. Do you guys remember when we talked about the womb last week? I forgot what word it was. I think it's healing. Healing is the word for womb in Hebrew. Don't quote me on that. I'm going from memory, but it's like when he heals us, it's like he puts us in the womb and protects us, right? And so there's all this imagery around the birth of the kingdom about him. Just it's like him being in. It's like giving birth to Zion, giving birth to the people, right? To Israel. Spiritual, the spiritual, the people who strive with Yah. That's what Israel means, right? Let's go to verse 7.
Before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came upon her, she delivered a son. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall a land be born in one day? Shall a nation be brought forth in one moment? For as soon as Zion was in labor, she brought forth her children. Shall I bring to the point of birth and not cause to bring forth, says the Lord? Shall I, who cause to bring forth, shut the womb, says your God? Rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad for her, all you who love her. Rejoice with her in joy, all you who mourn over her, that you may nurse and be satisfied from her consoling breast, that you may drink deeply with delight from her glorious abundance. For thus says the Lord, behold, I will extend peace to her like a river, and the glory of the nations like an overflowing stream. And you shall nurse, you shall be carried upon her hip, and bounced upon her knees. As one whom his mother comforts, so I will comfort you. You shall be comforted in Jerusalem. You shall see, and your heart shall rejoice. Your bones shall flourish like the grass, and the hand of the Lord shall be known to his servants, and he shall show his indignation against his enemies.
I just want to point out some of the metaphors that you see kind of consistently when you talk about Jerusalem.
For behold, the
Whoops.
Lord will
You see in the Church of Philadelphia in Revelation 3 how Philadelphia, Philadelphia is a picture of the royal priesthood, by the way. Philadelphia has the new name and the name of the city, New Jerusalem, written upon them. Okay, so Philadelphia understands everything, and they got to that place where they have the name of the city of New Jerusalem, and they will be pillars in the New Jerusalem. Okay, so when you talk about pillars, and this goes back to the Christmas trees, and this goes back to all these different break down the idols and the false pillars, right? The pillars are those which it's like the people, the tribes, the 12 tribes that the nation is built on. Okay, so those who are gathered, they will become the pillars, and then everybody else will be blessed out from there. Okay, and the waters will flow, meaning the spiritual waters, like the peace and the joy, will flow from there. Okay, so there's that part of New Jerusalem, and then you have this kind of picture of the birth pains, and so you always have the birth pains around these kind of verses. Isaiah 66 is the last book of Isaiah, I believe, and it's talking about the final days and the final gathering. So we are right now in these times of like birth pains and like leading up, and you guys can start to see like how the birth pains have been happening for the last few years, like a woman going into labor. So what he's saying to us is, like, when you see these birth pains, just like Yeshua said, don't be fearful. Because before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before pain came upon her, she delivered a son. Who has such a thing? So it's like we're having birth pains now, right? But that means that we're going to have a birth, and that's going to be the birth of the kingdom, right? So we should be excited about that. Yes, we have to go through these like very trying times where we're all being tribulated to some degree, but it means that we're going to have that breakthrough, and the kingdom will be born out of it, right? Let's go to verse 15.
Come in fire, and his chariots like the whirlwind, to render his anger and fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire will the Lord enter into judgment, and by his sword with all flesh, and those slain by the Lord shall be many. Those who sanctify and purify themselves to go into the gardens, following one in the midst, eating pig's flesh and the abomination and mice, shall come to an end together, declares the Lord. For I know their works and their thoughts, and the time is coming to gather all nations and tongues. And they shall come and shall see my glory, and I will set a sign among them. And from them I will send survivors to the nations, to Tarshish, Pul, and Lud, who draw the bow, to Tubal and Javan, to the coastlands far away, that have not heard my fame or seen my glory. And they shall declare my glory among the nations, and they shall bring all your brothers from all the nations as an offering to the Lord, on horses and in chariots and in litters and on mules and on dromedaries, to my holy mountain Jerusalem, says the Lord, just as the Israelites bring their grain offering in a clean vessel to the house of the Lord. And some of them also I will take for priests and for Levites, says the Lord.
This is interesting. I just want to point this out. So after it's all said and done, the survivors will go out and gather anyone who's dispersed amongst the nations and bring them into Jerusalem. And they are going to bring them all in chariots and litters and mules and dromedaries. So like in big fad fair, they're going to bring them back as an offering. Like, here's your lost people. Here's your lost, the people that were scattered. And he's going to even take some of these scattered people that were out amongst the nations for priests and Levites, and for Levites, says Jehovah. This is a really good so this is for the next verse is, for as the new heavens and new earth I will make. Some people say the law is done away with, the Torah is done away with. Okay, so we don't have the new heaven and new earth yet. This hasn't happened yet. So, right? this is that part where he says, I'm going to make the new heaven and new earth.
For as the new heavens and the new earth that I make shall remain before me, says the Lord, so shall your offspring and your name remain, from new moon to new moon, and from Sabbath to Sabbath. All flesh shall come to worship before me, declares the Lord. And they shall go out and look on the dead bodies of the men who have rebelled against me. For their worm shall not die, their fire shall not be quenched, and they shall be an abhorrence to all flesh.
All right. Let's go into, I think there was a different one that I had read earlier. I had read Jeremiah. One second. I'm gonna have to look something up, but that's okay. Let's do Mark, and then we might hop back because I had prepared some stuff about more stuff about slavery that I wanted to talk about, but I think it was in Jeremiah that I had prepared it from. So let's go into Mark first and finish this Torah portion. I think different groups have different Torah portions sometimes.
For the one who is not against us is for us. For truly I say to you, whoever gives you a cup of water to drink because you belong to Christ will by no means lose his reward. Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a great millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea. And if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life crippled than with two hands to go to hell, to the unquenchable fire. And if your foot causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life lame than with 2 feet to be thrown into hell. And if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out. It is better for you to enter the kingdom of God with 1 eye than with 2 eyes to be thrown into hell, where their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. For everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its saltiness, how will you make it salty again? Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another.
This is kind of crazy because I had a dream this week and I didn't read this before. I had a dream this week that somebody had to cut off their hand. A particular person had to cut off their hand. That's crazy. I didn't even know this was in the Torah portion this week. I just want to look up the other thing that I was studying this week to go over it with you guys. I don't know why I had different portions for some reason. I had taken from Nehemiah's portions. Mishpatim. Yeah, Jeremiah 34. Let's read that because I had prepared stuff for Jeremiah 34. 8 to 22, 33, 25 to 26. Let's go there just because I had some stuff prepared for that. I love Jeremiah too. I'm just going to start from the beginning of Jeremiah 34. And the word that came to Jeremiah from Jehovah when Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and all his army and kingdoms of the earth were under his dominion, and all the people were fighting against Jerusalem and all its cities. Thus says Jehovah, the God of Israel, go and speak to Zedekiah, the king of Judah, and say to him, thus says Jehovah, behold, I am giving this city into the hand of the king of Babylon, and he shall burn it with fire. You shall not escape from his hand, but surely be captured and delivered into his hand. And you shall see the king of Babylon eye to eye and speak with him face to face, and you shall go to Babylon. Yet hear the word of Jehovah, O Zedekiah, king of Judah. Thus says Jehovah concerning you, you shall not die by the sword, you shall die in peace. And as spices were burned for your fathers and the former kings before you, so should the people burn spices for you and lament for you, saying, Alas, Lord, for I have spoken the word, declares Jehovah. Then Jeremiah the prophet spoke all these words to Zedekiah, the king of Judah, in Jerusalem. And when the army of the king of Babylon was fighting against Jerusalem and against all the cities of Judah that were left, Lachish and Azkah, for those were only the fortified cities of Judah that had remained. So they only had 2 fortified cities left. And they're at war with the king of Babylon. The word came to Jeremiah from Jehovah after King Zedekiah had made a covenant with all the people in Jerusalem to make a proclamation of liberty to them. Okay, so let's stop here. The word came to Jeremiah from Jehovah after King Zedekiah had made a covenant with all the people in Jerusalem to make a proclamation of liberty to them, that everyone should set free his Hebrew slaves, male and female, and that no one should enslave a Jew, his brother. They obeyed all the officials and all the people who had entered the covenant, that everyone would set free his slave, male and female, and that they would not be enslaved again. And they obeyed and set them free. Okay, so if you stop there, it's a good thing. They obeyed the word of Jehovah, and they were told to set their slaves free. And so they did this. They set their slaves free. That word for liberty is daror. And daror is really, really interesting because it means to set free. It means to liberate, obviously, but it's also the name of a bird. So you'll see it crop up a couple times in, I think, Psalms and Proverbs as the name of a bird. So it's this picture of being set free, right? Like a bird flying free, okay? So they had made this agreement. The king of Babylon is on them, trying to take the land, trying to enslave them, okay? This goes back to that eye for the eye, tooth for the tooth thing, right? What did they do? They obeyed, and they set them free, right? But then what did they do? Verse 11, but afterward they turned around and took back their male and female slaves that they had set free and brought them into subjugation as slaves. The word of Jehovah came to Jeremiah from Jehovah. Thus says Jehovah, the God of Israel, I made myself a covenant with your fathers when I brought them out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, saying, at the end of 7 years, you must set free the fellow Hebrew that has been sold to you and served 6 years. You must set him free from your service. But your fathers did not listen to me or incline their ears to me. You recently repented and did what was right in my eyes by proclaiming liberty, each to his neighbor, and you made a covenant before me in the house that was called by my name. But you turned around and profaned my name when each of you took back his male and female slaves, to whom you had set free according to their desire, and you brought them back into subjugation to be your slaves. So the people turned around. As soon as they were done, they turned around and they brought the people back into bondage. They brought them into bondage to be their slaves, right? I want you to think of this in our kind of like biblical worldview with this understanding of Yeshua, because I find this kind of interesting because this goes into religion and legalism, right? So we want to obey Jehovah's commandments to the best of our abilities and look for his spirit in them and follow him in spirit and truth, right? When does subjugation happen? When does subjugation happen? It's when you come under somebody else and you have to live by their rules and their desires and what they want you to do, okay? And so like, I'm just going to use Rome as an example. So what do you have to do if you're a Roman Catholic? You have to go and do your Lent. You have to do your fasting. I was talking to this girl who is Orthodox on one of my videos. We're just commenting back and forth. Really nice lady. But she said, oh, we fast 2 times a week. We have to fast Wednesdays and Fridays or something. But we keep the Sabbath and we also go on Sunday. But it's like, these were the extra little things that are not, it doesn't say in the scripture that you need to fast Wednesday and Friday, right? And so what has happened there? The Orthodox has brought their subjugation, their bondage onto the people. because that stuff isn't written, right? It's not written that you have to fast on Wednesday and Thursday, right? This goes back into 2 Corinthians 17 or Colossians 2:17. Colossians 2:17, right? Extra fast days, extra, like you got to do this to look extra holy. You got to do that to look extra holy. So that's what subjugation looks like. The Torah is not about subjugation. The Torah is about living in community and living in relationship with Yehovah. It's about that relationship with each other. Love your neighbor, love Yehovah. That's what the Torah is about, right? The subjugation, adding bondage onto people, adding yokes onto people is what has happened through history because people want to rule over each other, right? I even had this I've had this happen so much too on videos where people try to find something and they try to like, oh, you're doing this, you're breaking the Torah, like trying to like point their fingers and stuff. It's like they're trying to put their stuff on you, right? And so we're supposed to help each other enter the kingdom and understand the Torah and walk in that relationship with each other and Yehovah in peace. We're not supposed to be bringing people into the bondage of slavery. Another conversation I had with another girl, she had joined a church and they had all these extra things, like women had to always dress a certain way. You had to do all this extra stuff, right? And it was based around the Torah loosely, but it was really added on. Like it was really, but they would tell you, the church was going to tell them how they had to do it, right? This is how your family has to do it. This is how your family has to be here at a certain time. This is how your family has to do this and that. And then when you start to do that it kind of can really creep up into a place of subjugation really, really fast. And you see that in all sorts of church culture, from the Mormons to the Catholics to the, Baptists to whatever. It happens in every sort of church culture. And what it is people trying to put their image over you instead of just helping you to know Yeshua's image, right? They want to put their image on you. So anyways, that's just my side rant on that. But so what is happening here is he brought the people back into subjugation. The people were set free and they brought them back into subjugation. Jeremiah 34:17. Therefore, thus says Yehovah, you have not obeyed me by proclaiming liberty, everyone to his brother and to his neighbor. Behold, I proclaim to you liberty to the sword. So behold, I proclaim to you liberty to the sword, to pestilence, to famine, declares Yehovah. I will make you a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth. That's that quid pro quo that we talked about before. If you're going to put people into bondage, he's going to put the bondage on you. So however you deal, if you forgive your brother, he will forgive you. If you put bondage on your brother, he's going to put bondage on you, right? And so this comes back to, so what does he do? He's going to put these people, because they would not let their servants go free, he's going to put them now into captivity from the Babylonians, right? And that's what he's proclaiming to them. I'm going to the sword, to the pestilence, to the famine, declares Yehovah. I will make you a horror to all the kingdoms on earth. And all the men who transgressed my covenant and did not keep the terms of the covenant that they made before me, I will make them like the calf that they cut into two and pass between its parts. The officials of Judah, the officials of Jerusalem, the eunuchs, the priests, and all the people of the land who passed between the parts of the calf. So they made the covenant. Okay, that's what that's referring to, like Abraham passed between the parts. That's like an allusion to making the covenant, right? That's what he's speaking about. I will give them into the hand of their enemies and into the hand of those who seek their lives. Their dead bodies shall be food for the birds and of the air and of the beasts of the earth. And Zedekiah, the king of Judah, and his officials, I will give into the hand of their enemies, and into the hand of those who seek their lives, and to the hand of the army of the king of Babylon, which has withdrawn from you. Behold, I will command, declares Yehovah, and I will bring them back to the city, and they will fight against it and take it and burn it with fire. And I will make the cities of Judah a desolation without inhabitant. And that did happen. That historically did happen. So because we talked about liberty so much in this, I want to go through some stuff. Somebody was commenting on my post, like, why are we having these eclipses only on America and all this stuff happening over America? This is my theory on this. And this is just my 2 cents, take it or leave it. When America was founded, it was founded on the covenant. It was originally like originally. The idea was, to have a land where they could walk with God freely, right? And that was the idea behind America. As far as I understand, I'm not American, so if I get your American history wrong, I'm sorry. Please correct me. Send me information. I didn't grow up in school learning American history as much. We did learn it a bit, but not as much as we do Canadian history, obviously. So when America was founded, it was founded on the biblical principles. Okay. There was no Christmas in America when it was founded. There's lots of information that alludes to that they were trying to just live biblically. But then that got twisted, right? We know it got twisted. That's where the slavery came in, which is interesting because America did have the whole slavery problem, which a lot of other countries didn't have to that degree, right? You guys had a huge slavery problem. Like Canada didn't have that, maybe in different ways, but didn't have it to the degree. Actually, the Underground Railroad that came up to Canada. So that's where the slaves were trying to escape to, was Canada. So yay, Canada, good job there. But I just want to talk to you about the Liberty Bell, because I don't know if you know this, but there's also a Liberty Bell in Jerusalem. Did you know that? There is a Liberty Bell in Jerusalem. So the Liberty Bell in Jerusalem is, I don't know if you can see it on my, here, I'll show you guys. I don't know how to switch this all the time. Flip camera. Flip. Okay, Jerusalem Liberty Bell. I didn't look up. It does have some biblical writing on it. Get a better picture. It's huge. That can't be it. Is that how big it is? No. Yeah, it's huge. Or is that guy just standing back farther back? So let's look and see if we can see what it says. This is, okay, so it is a replica of the American one, right? And it was put up in 1976. I just learned about this today. I didn't know there was a Liberty Bell in Jerusalem to celebrate the USA's bicentennial, covering 9 acres and the most popular park in the city. So they made a whole park, which I thought was really, really interesting, that they have a replica of the Liberty Bell there. So now let's look at the Liberty Bell in the United States, which is the cracked one. And if you look into this crack, it's really interesting. There's a lot of interesting history about like where the crack came from and where they don't really know for sure where it came from. I would love to go check this out. But there is a theory that the crack showed up when they refused to let the slaves go free, which would make sense, right? And then I was thinking about what we talked about earlier, how there's not supposed to be slavery in the United States, but there kind of is still because of the prison system, right? And so, it's kind of like slavery through the back door, right? Like sneaky slavery with prison system. Anyways, things you could dig into if you feel like today. I just find it interesting. I didn't know that there was a replica of the Liberty Bell in Jerusalem. That's pretty cool. It's an uncracked one, though. It's an uncracked one. What does that mean? We can make a whole theory on what it means that the one in Jerusalem isn't cracked. Yeah, so do a deep dive into, I even pulled it up. Do a deep dive into why the Liberty Bell is cracked. They don't really seem to know.
The U.S. is 50 states strong today, but it began as 13 small colonies. It all started.
Just started playing a video. Yeah, super interesting. I don't have much more to say about that. There was something about it. They did it during the Feast of Sukkot or something. I heard that somewhere, but I can't remember where I heard it, so don't quote me on that. But there was some kind of thing where they like it was very biblical how they were going about it. But I don't know where to find that information now or where I read it. It's back in the day. Maybe one of you guys knows. Maybe one of you guys has deep dived into this. I did at one point, but I forget all the details. According to one of the story, it was first cracked back in 1824 during the visit of the Revolutionary War hero Marcus de Lafayette. Another story is it holds that it was fractured later that year while toiling a signal for a fire. One of the most popular legends claims that the bell cracked during the funeral of Chief Justice John Marshall in 1835, but newspaper accounts for the funeral do not mention such an incident. Whatever the truth is, it seems that the bell was certainly damaged by 1946 or 1846, when, according to official city records, Philadelphia's mayor requested that the bell be rung on George Washington's birthday. Although many attempts were made to repair an existing fracture in the bell for the occasion, and the bell reportedly tolled loud and clear at first, and it subsequently cracked beyond repair and had to be taken out of service. After being moved to the pavilion near Independence Hall in 1976, the bicentennial Declaration of Independence, in 2003, the Liberty Bell was relocated to Liberty Bell Center in the Independence National History Park, where millions of visitors view the famous crack each year. Anyways, I'm just interesting stuff. I'm gonna stop the recording, and anything you guys want to talk about, we can talk about. Well, not anything, but whatever you want to talk about.